Okay, we are going to start talking about the autonomic nervous system. And just like with the somatosensory system, we start with the receptors. But unlike the somatosensory system, the autonomic nervous system has both afferent and efferent features. The somatosensory system is all afferent. The motor system is all efferent. The autonomic system goes both ways. So, just like in the somatic system, the autonomic nervous system has the same four type of receptors: the mechanoreceptors, the chemoreceptors, the nociceptors, and the thermoreceptors. They just receive a little bit different information and send it to the autonomic nervous system. The mechanoreceptors, the stimulus is pressure and stretch, just like it is in the somatosensory system. They're located in the aorta and the carotid sinuses for pressure. That's controlling your blood pressure, and in the lungs. And stretch for the distension of veins and intestines and the bladder. The chemoreceptors in the autonomic nervous system, they measure chemical levels, like O2 levels, for example, in your blood, in the carotid and aortic bodies, and hydrogen and CO2 levels in the medulla, blood glucose and electrolyte levels in the hypothalamus, which controls a lot of our metabolism, and other chemical signals from the stomach and the taste buds and the olfactory bulbs. The nociceptors in the ANS, just like the nociceptors in the somatosensory system, they are subtypes of receptors. So they are stimulated by stretch, ischemia, and irritating chemicals. So ischemia is the lack of oxygen. They're located throughout the viscera. A lot of the autonomic nociceptors synapse with motor system effectors and can cause muscle guarding. And then they also go up and activate things in the CNS, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Thermoreceptors in the ANS, they detect changes in blood temperature, and those are in the hypothalamus, and that is going to help regulate our metabolism. And changes in external temperature, and those are, of course, in the cutaneous receptors in the skin. So that really the ANS receptors, just the same as the somatosensory receptors in terms of types, a little bit different stimuli and location. Okay, so like I said, the somatosensory system and the autonomic nervous system are a little bit different. The autonomic has both afferent and efferent pathways. So we'll talk just a little bit about the differences between the two systems, the somatic systems and the okay. So you will have this. I'll have this PowerPoint that you can download, and you can. Okay, obviously really organized here. So well, first we'll talk about the control of the autonomic functions from the central nervous system. So there are areas in the medulla that regulate heart rate, respiration, vasoconstriction, and dilation. And they send their signals through the spinal cord and the vagus nerve, and there are areas in the pons that are involved in regulating respiration. So obviously those are vital functions. They're really important. If you had a brainstem injury, it could affect your vital functions. Okay, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system, they modulate that brainstem autonomic control. And the hypothalamus also uses visceral information to maintain equilibrium in the interior of the body. It influences the cardiorespiratory system, the metabolic system, water reabsorption from the large intestine, digestive activity, and it does a lot of its things by acting on endocrine glands and control centers in the brainstem and spinal cord. Okay, the thalamus, what it does is it provides the only conscious part that is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And visceral information is projected from the thalamus mainly to the limbic system. And that's the collection of cerebral areas involved in emotion, mood, and motivation. So the limbic system, when it's activated, it can produce autonomic responses. So like your heart beating fast as a result of anxiety, blushing with embarrassment, or crying because of fear, elation, happiness, sadness, any type of emotional response. So the limbic system produces those autonomic responses as a result of emotion. So kind of interesting, and mood and motivation. So the three major differences, this is what I was going to talk about earlier, but the three major differences between the somatic efferents, the motor system, which we'll talk about more in Chapter 10, and the autonomic efferents is unlike the somatic nervous system, the regulation of the autonomic functions is typically below the conscious level. And a lot of it is exerted by hormones. So unlike skeletal muscles, the second difference, unlike skeletal muscles, many of the internal organs can function independently of central nervous system input. So the heart does not need a message from the medulla to keep beating. The sinoatrial node does that for it. It's its built-in pacemaker. However, the rate is controlled by the medulla, but the internal organs will function. Some of them will function independently, regardless of CNS input. The third difference in the two efferent systems is the somatic efferent pathways use only one neuron. So there's a lower motor neuron that goes from the cerebrum all the way down to the muscle. And the autonomic efferent pathways usually use two neurons that synapse outside the central nervous system. So those are kind of the main big difference. So all of the CNS output, all of the output from the CMS is delivered to the rest of the body either by somatic or autonomic efferents. So the somatic efferents innervate only the skeletal muscle, and the activation is frequently voluntary. And the autonomic efferents supply every other part of the body that's innervated. So the autonomic system does a lot for us. Okay, we're going to wrap this up a little bit. We're going to talk about neurotransmitters a little bit, and a little bit about how the pathways affect other systems. But this will be a short little section, and we will move on to the next section.